Thank you for coming. My name is Mark Webster. I'm the president of the Friends of the Jefferson County Law Library. Welcome to our monthly Authors Forum. This will be the last one for this year. Our next one is not until March. We take off during the winter. Our speaker today is Kevin Gibson. I think this is going to be interesting because he's going to be speaking about something that you all know about, the city of Louisville. Kevin is a native, I guess, of Southern Indiana and Louisville. He went to IU Southeast. This is his 10th book. By the way, we have, I think, his 9th book we're going to give away, right?
Yes.
That's your 9th book? So he's going to ask a trivia question at the end, and if you get it right, you're going to win the book that preceded this. This book is interesting, and I encourage you to take a look at it. The very building that you're sitting in is included in this book also. So, Mr. Gibson, it's your turn.
My turn, okay. It's good to see familiar faces. Good to be back here. So you've probably heard this spiel before, but whenever the last three or four books, maybe 5 books that I've written, I always find myself discovering new things about Louisville. And the analogy that I always use is that when we're going through life and we're driving to work and we're taking our kids to school and we're going to the grocery store or the doctor, we're driving and we're just getting to our destination and we have that experience and we drive back home and we're not really seeing what we're going past. And it's like for my book Secret Louisville, the first thing I wanted to do was write about the chicken steps, which is in my neighborhood. I'd heard about them for years, and I didn't know where the heck they were, or really even what they were. People just always down there by the chicken steps. I'm like, what is this? So I set out to find it. Like, this is the first thing I want to do for this book. And so I knew about where they were, so I went and I parked in the CVS parking lot, and I got out of my car and I stepped onto the sidewalk and there was a green sign that said chicken steps that way. I'm like, well, there you go. I've been driving by this for 10 years and never saw it because I didn't stop to pay attention. If I had walked down that street, I would have knew where it was years ago. So this is forcing you to stop. This is going to tell you things that you probably don't know about, that you might see all the time. You just don't realize what it is or what its significance is. So I'm going to go through and just talk a little bit about a few of the chapters, and then we're going to do a trivia question at the end, and whoever gets that first will get this book. So oldest Louisville, this is about the oldest things. So the very first one in the book is the oldest known tree. So in our parks department, in a little park over on Poplar Level Road, there is a tree that they believe was planted by the Clark family in the late 1700s. The legend is that George Rogers Clark himself stuck his writing stick in the ground, and from there, this mighty poplar grew. I don't think that's true. There's also a legend that the tree grew around a Native American who had passed away, and his body is still entombed in the tree. I don't think that's true either. But that's the fun part about history, is you can make up whatever you want if you don't know the truth. But John Clark and his family purchased the land there in 1785, and the belief is because these, not poplar, cypress trees weren't really native to Louisville at the time. So the belief is he brought some cones from Virginia. Cypress trees were known to be, rot resistant. So people, apparently the early settlers were using cypress wood to build their homes and things like that so they would last longer. So the belief is he thought, well, I'm going to bring cypress trees here so that in later years my descendants will have better wood to use. It's a theory, no one really knows for sure, but it was actually, the tree was planted right next to an old, like a water mill. So there's a creek that runs through there. The creek is still there in the park. The family graveyard is still in the park, and it's called George Rogers Clark Park. If you go in to see it, so if you go in, you'll see the playground and you'll see the cemetery. You've got to go down a hill and kind of veer to your left, and through some trees to find this oldest tree. And my fiance and I took her son and his little brother down there, and I told him the story. He's 4 years old. What what does he care? And he excitedly went home and told his dad, Kevin showed me the oldest tree in the world. In the world. Once again, not to be believed, but hey, he was 4. What the heck? Let him believe it, right? The oldest living zoo animal, got a chapter in the book, and that's an 86-year-old tortoise named Dot. And she may be older potentially, but Dot has been hanging out here for years and years and years. And the great thing is that she's not even close to being the oldest such tortoise in the world. There's one that's been alive since like the late 1800s or mid 1800s. He doesn't live in the United States, but very interesting reading about Dot, learning about him. I interviewed the PR director, and she got me some quotes from some of Dot's handlers, and apparently Dot has taken to humans over the years. She likes being touched, she likes being petted now, and she loves to be fed carrots and cucumbers and things. So that's Dot's living the life. All right, one of my favorite stories in the book. So you know where the Belle of Louisville is docked, right? There's a floating vessel next to it. It has sort of a cone top. That was the old life-saving station number 10. So life-saving station number 10 was the first inland life-saving station ever in America. And it was launched here back in the late 1800s because vessels, more and more people were heading west on the Ohio River. And if you didn't know that there was a falls there, right over the falls. And so they built this structure and they hired these guys to kind of be the police of the falls. And they became known as the heroes of the falls. They saved hundreds of lives, hundreds of boats. They had some crazy adventures where boats would get stuck and they would have to figure out how to tow it back. And in fact, one of the most famous guys that was well known around the state for all the lives he saved, he was out on his day off with his wife in a rowboat, and she fell into the water. He had to rescue her. So the most important life you save may be your wife's. But really cool stories. And in fact, I kind of went down the rabbit hole with that one. It should have taken me 2 hours to write, and it probably took me all day. So that's the bad thing about being a writer and a researcher and a history nerd, is that once you start learning about this stuff, I could just write it and get it done and move on to the next thing, but I can't do that. So it takes me forever because I want to read it. I want to get everything I can about it, the people and their situations. And I hope that you're going to find that when if you get the book and read it. Another one of my favorites is, what the oldest TV station is?
Wave.
It's Wave. When it first went on the air, very few people had televisions. This was a time when, a TV was almost like buying a car, very expensive. Let me find the YouTube. So once Wave was up and running, had the signal going, well then it's like, what do we put on TV? You had the network stuff, they could just put on the news and stuff like that, the talking heads. And they were like, well, we got to do something local. So the very first thing that was shown on TV in Louisville, locally, was a girl making faces to music. That was it. She was just making faces. And then they showed square dancing. Yeah. So the local media critic said the next day, the times truly have changed. Bill Ladd, if you remember his name, I remember reading his stuff. He said, just because you can see something in your own living room doesn't make it good. But more interestingly, when they started showing sports, he again was very skeptical. He was a radio guy. He came from radio. He was like, oh, we're showing pictures we don't need that. We tell stories, through words and sounds. But he said, the day of every games being good, every forward pass being a potential touchdown, every pop fly being a threatening line drive, and every catch as being a superhuman effort, that day went away with TV. And if you think about it, if you listen to a game, the announcer's going, back, 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 caught at the warning track. Well, you don't really know what's going on because you're miles and miles away. you watch it on TV, you know exactly what's going on because the cameras are showing it. Takes some of the drama out of it, you know? So I had never thought about that until I started reading these Bill Ladd articles from back in the 50s, and I thought, man, I'm so much more cynical now. You know? I was cynical to begin with. All right, what's another good one? The first crematorium in Kentucky was right here in Louisville. And it was a little tiny one right in front of Eastern Cemetery. Of course, Eastern Cemetery has its own wild history, you know, with all the multiple burials and all that. So there's a little building in the front of that, and that was the first crematorium. And it was designed so that you got a little chapel, family could come in, they could do their final little, and then the body, the casket would just be lowered into the basement. And you could literally watch as they push the casket into, you know, the crematorium, and that was when you say goodbye to your loved ones. And hold on a second. And so that was, they later built a bigger one at the back of the lot. It's still there, but it's locked up because homeless people kept getting into it. But that little crematorium now is a bed and breakfast. I mean, a Airbnb. So literally, the basement has now been converted. You can sleep down there where people used to be cremated. Yeah, so, and they even call it the crematorium. They make no bones about what it used to be. It's a really interesting building. So the next time you're down there, driving down Baxter, there's still, in the front yard of this place, there's still a grave marker. So imagine getting to Louisville. I found this cheap, cute little Airbnb, and there are people buried in the front yard. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'd love to see somebody's face if they don't know what they're getting into. But did you have a question?
Well, just a quick one. I wasn't going to ask, but since you're talking about the crematorium, the oldest Native American burial site that's in your book here, I don't know how you found that, but the idea that it's in the middle of the airport,
yeah,
is wild to me. I just can't.
Someone just gave me the tip.
Yeah.
And so it's not the oldest one, it's the oldest one that's in an airport. I took some liberties on that. But I interviewed one of the archaeologists over there the day that they dug it up, and so she said a lot of people say it's just a story, but it's not a story, it's the real thing. So well, let's see, we'll do a couple more here and we can do some questions. Of course, you know the oldest jail cells that I know of are just right through there, right? Yeah, so I just like, when the last time I was here and I was shown those, I was blown away because it's like you walk in there and suddenly you're in Shawshank Redemption. It's so strange. But I thought, just for fun, I'm going to put that in there. And maybe they're not the oldest, but you know, what the heck? Well, you know, they're older than the ones down the street. So that has always fascinated me about this place because this building was one of the top rated jails in America when it was built. You know, and the whole premise behind building a new one was because the old one was smelly, and they had no way to sanitize or cleanse, you know, the inmates, and they had terrible food, and you know, it was all these complaints, and so they said, okay, we're going to build a new one, and the other one was torn down pretty quickly. But we were talking before we started, is they just brought all the prisoners down the street in wagons, in paddy wagons, and it was an open air jail. So the prisoners could yell at people walking by. He says he has a memory of that. Prisoners could look out and yell at you and stuff. So people were coming to see the new jail open, and there were prisoners already in there yelling at them, asking for money and asking for stuff. And what a strange time to be alive, you know. But interesting, there was a jail cat that lived at the old jail for a long time. He was hanging around on the steps, and when everybody moved, the cat just followed. He just walked down and found his place in the new jail. So, but yeah, one of the articles I read talked about how many ankles were sprained. People trying to step over the cat when they were walking into the jail. Sounds like a cat. No offense to you cat people. As you know, I'm a dog person. I like cats too, though. I like cats too. Okay. Let me find. I'm just going to go to my very favorite one in the book, I think. So the oldest Catholic cemetery is St. Louis. So that's the one between Baxter and Barrett. It literally was, back in the old days, churches had graveyards. It literally was like the first one that was like, okay, we got to build a bigger one because we've got too many people for our graveyard. So all the graves got moved from that church up to where it is now. And you walk around in there, and that's my fiance. One of our favorite pastimes is walking around old cemeteries. And Atticus loves it too, my dog. So, but we noticed the first time we went there, it was like there are like a lot of old and people that were born in Ireland, born in England, and came here, and died here. And it's really fascinating, some of the history. And then if you've ever seen findagrave.com, if you ever find yourself walking through a cemetery and you see a really interesting stone, you can put that person's name into the database, and chances are they'll be able to tell you who they were, what they did, who their relatives were. Really cool stuff. Like I said, I'm a nerd and a history nerd, and boy, that just lights my fire when I go to an old cemetery and find a story of somebody that I never knew existed. Well, anyway, in St. Louis Cemetery, there is a guy named Michael Doc Powers. He was a professional baseball player, played for the Louisville Colonels, played for several major league teams, and he died running into a wall chasing a foul ball. It was the opening day at Philadelphia Shibe Park. Opening day, first ever game played there, and he ran into a foul ball, lacerated his intestines, and went septic and died. And his wife still lived here in Louisville, so she moved him back and had him buried there in St. Louis. The most interesting thing I found was a story that one day a young woman in 1890 came to Louisville to visit some friends. Her name was Emma Zener. Her fiance remained back in Evansville where they lived, and after a while he didn't hear from her, so he said, I'm going to travel to Louisville, see what's going on. He gets here, friends don't know where she is. He just starts looking for her, walking around town looking for her. And he finds her walking hand in hand with some other guy. And she had fallen in love with some fellow named Thomas Overby. And obviously, her fiance didn't care for this. Words were exchanged. Someone proposed a duel. And they said, okay, we're going to have a duel at 10 p.m. or whatever tonight. Word got around. A reporter showed up. They went and found a physician, literally a doctor, to tend to whoever got shot. And the doctor was the one who counted to 3 as pistols were in weight. And when people gathered around, it happened in St. Louis Cemetery. So they agreed to do it at Cave Hill, and they were like a big, almost like a parade, people walking down Baxter Avenue. For some reason, no one really knows why, they went past Cave Hill and went to St. Louis. And I'm like, there's no entrance to St. Louis off Baxter. And so I went down there to take some pictures, and sure enough, you can see there's a place in that wall on Baxter with the stones different. So at some point they blocked that off. So that's where they went in, and it's basically literally had the duel among the gravestones. And so shots rang out, flashes in the darkness, and the fiance went down, and it says, and this was covered by the New York Times. This was covered all over the country. This was a huge national story at the time. It was 10:40 p.m. As the last number was called, this is from the Courier Journal, by the physician, a blaze of fire flashed from the muzzles of both pistols. Before one could see whether either man was wounded, 4 more reports rang out, and Mr. Sanders staggered up to the tombstone near him and supported himself with its cold sides. He was hit once in the chest, once in the arm, but he did survive, and he quickly left town and headed back to Evansville, never to return. Mr. Overby, who shot him, he also left town quickly, and guess what? Emma Zener was left without any guys. So in an editorial 2 days later, the Courier Journal said the duel over, quote unquote, the fickleness of a woman is the one thing least worth fighting about in the world. Maybe a little misogynistic, but you get the point. There's no point resorting to violence. I gotta tell you, if my fiance started consorting with someone else, I'd just head back to Evansville and never think another thing about it. Okay, who's got questions? Anyone? Yes, ma'am?
The find the grave thing, is that just for the St. Louis cemetery or is that for other cemeteries?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The find the grave website?
That's for all over the country. Yeah. All over the country. So anywhere, anytime she and I go out of town, we try to find a cemetery, and I always call it up on my phone so we can know what we're looking at. We went to, I think the last we went to was Bardstown. And there's some fascinating, politicians and stuff buried there, and people from the distilling industry. Yeah. I think he was just before it.
Weren't there movie theaters on 4th Street at some point?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
Tons of them. And that's, the Palace Theater was one of the first ones. And it's the oldest one that still shows movies. There are a couple buildings down there that used to be theaters, but the Palace still shows movies sometimes. Yep. Yes, sir.
So what is the oldest building still standing in?
The oldest building, I mean, the Pageant House down by the river, they think it dates to the late 1700s. There's also a log house in Anchorage they think dates to around that time, but there were really no records left from them because that was before Louisville was even a thing. There is one building that is the oldest wood frame structure. That's in Portland, and that's got an interesting story too. We'll do one more here, then I'll shut up. So 128. So the Squire Eric House was owned by many people, but it fell into the hands of a fellow named Squire Eric, and he was the magistrate, the first magistrate in town. So he was the one who would have to arrest and try criminals. There was no jail, so that made things tricky. So he literally would hold criminals in his basement. He put bars on his basement door and all the windows, and he would hold court in his dining room. This was the Wild West back in those days. But this was back in the 1800s. He was well known as a crazy character, and he was actually captured during the Civil War because the Northern soldiers thought he was Robert E. Lee. He looked just like Robert E. Lee, so they captured him and thought they captured this big general, and it turns out they were wrong. But yeah, interesting guy, a lot of interesting stories about that guy. And you can learn more about him at the Portland Museum. They've got family portraits and stuff from his house, and the house is owned by the museum as well. So my understanding is it's in bad repair, but it still has a lot of the original. Really? Sorry. But it still has, they have a lot of the old artifacts that he left behind, which is because they stayed in one family for years and years and years, and they kept a lot of the stuff around. So, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
This is a two-part question. First of all, how did you decide that you were going to look up the oldest things in Louisville? You've
Well,
done a lot
and
of
we were
old
talking about
stuff.
that also. So,
But secondly,
yeah.
how did you attack it? Where did you start?
Okay. So this is a series. So my publisher is based out of St. Louis, and they come up with concepts and they test them in their market, and if they work the way they want them to, then they find writers in other cities all over the country. And so there's probably at least this is only like the fourth one that's come out, but there's the oldest Chicago, and luckily, like, my books sell really well here, so I'm usually one of the first ones they come to get the book out into the market. But every book I've done so far, save for the ones I've done, like my fiction book, which I'm out of, is sort of the same thing. It's a series. Like, I went to Nashville, Tennessee after my beer book came out, and literally, Nashville beer, same beer glass, Nashville backdrop. I'm like, but the good thing is, when they hand you the contract, they say, okay, here's the guidelines, make it your own. So they give me 100%, control over what the content of the book. I choose all of the chapters, so as far as attacking it, the U of L, or the Courier Journal archives, you know, I use social media, I use Google. I'm a big Google guy. I've gotten really good at doing this research on Google. But there, you know, we live in a world of listicles. So people have written, you know, these are the 10 oldest buildings in Louisville. These are the 10, you know, we're all looking at lists these days. That's what drives readership. For whatever reason, people like lists, I guess because they know it's going to be short. So I compiled a bunch of them, decided which ones I thought were most interesting, and a couple of them just didn't work out. You know, you start looking like, I don't know if I have enough for a full chapter here, move on to the next one. Well, we wound up that we cut 7 full chapters from the book and probably another 15 or 16 sidebars. So what I'm doing now is I started a Patreon community. So for $5 a month, I'm posting the stuff, these, you know, never before seen content. One of them I haven't posted yet, but I wrote about for the Insider Louisville back before it went defunct, and it's now gone. But I've got the copy. But the first ever school shooting happened in Louisville a lot of years ago, like 100 years ago. Yeah. So that's a grim topic, and they said no way that's going in the book. So I understand, but it's a really interesting story. So that'll go up at some point. Just I'm trying to figure out the best way to frame it so nobody gets offended, you know, because it really is a difficult topic to look into. But yeah, that's it. And one thing I always do when I get to the point where I'm like, I think I found everything that I need, then I go on Facebook and ask my 2,800 Facebook friends, do you know of anything that might be good in this book concept? And I always end up getting 2 or 3 at least, you know. And so I always promise people that your name will be in the book if you give me one that I actually use. Yes, sir.
So you're right about lists. People love lists. Something
Yeah.
else people love is trivia. So what's, if you feel comfortable, what's one of the 7 chapters that didn't make the cut?
One is Earler's Dairy, you know, the Earler's ice cream. So that's the oldest dairy company still operating. And back in around 1922, I think, one of the Earler boys was making his rounds, and he was robbed at gunpoint and killed. And I actually just posted that one on my Patreon just last week. But it was a huge thing, of course. That it turns out there was some sort of conspiracy that was. It was really an interesting story, but in the end, publishers were like, I don't know if we want to go this far with a murder. You know, maybe we want to just pull back on that one and said, all right, if it's the way you feel, then, you know. So that's why some stuff didn't get in because of that. Some stuff just, we just didn't have room. I just wrote too much, you know, so I do that sometimes.
Well, thank you. The books are published by Reedy out of St. Louis.
Yeah.
Right.
Reedy Press.
So I guess we'll give away this book, so come up with your trivia question.
Who knows for whom Louisville was named?
Something or other.
Shout it out.
16?
What's that?
Louis the 16th or the 14th?
Louis the 14th. Louis the 14th.
I always think
Yep.
that's it.
King Louis, that's why it's Louisville, not Louisville, because there was no King Louis. That drives me crazy. When you say Louisville, I'm like, no. Want me to sign this for you?
Yes, please.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having me. There you go. Do you, yeah, me too. I hope it goes back up at some point.
Thank you.
So I do have some books to sell.